In this video, I will be showcasing how to use masks and how to add effects to them. So before we begin, I'm going to quickly explain what masks are. A simple way to understand them is that masks are used to help you display certain content on your object, such as like textures, materials, etc. And it helps to show them on certain parts of your object. Masks work using grayscales, so black means that there's no visibility, and white means that it is visibility. So white areas on a mask will basically bring out the texture or the effect that you desire. It's a really cool effect. You can add some great enhancing details that you can't do with the fill layer or even with the basic paint layer. So what I've done right now is I have a new layer. I've also renamed them as well by just double clicking it. So I have this edge one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this sort of light. Actually, I'm going to change the color to more of a whitish, just for the sake of this. Oops, wrong one. Just for the sake of this tutorial, so you can kind of see what's happening right now. So I got a light grey there. So I want this light grey texture on the sort of edges of this model here. But right now it's overpowering everything else. So what I can do is I can create a mask. So by right clicking, I can add a black mask. And you can see that you can't see it anymore, even though it's right at the top of the layer. Why? Because we've added a black mask saying that there is no visibility whatsoever. And now with that created, what I can do is, with the mask selected, I can add various different effects and generators to it. So if I go to add generator, in the properties, I can go to generator, and Substance Painter has various different effects that you can add. So you have like a dirt effect, you have like this sort of dripping rust, fabric, mask editor, etc. Even lighting as well. So we'll go through a couple of these today. So what I'm going to do right now is the metal edge, because obviously this is a metal object. So if I click on that, you'll see that this white texture now, or this light grey texture, is now showing up. So if I hover over the mask, or even if I show you as well actually, to mask, you can see here that certain areas are full on white, meaning that it's visible, and certain areas are sort of like light greyish or just straight up black, meaning that okay, this is now popping through. And with that metal edgeware on, I can now go to the generator and start playing around with these effects. So I can make it quite pronounced, or just have it sort of ever so subtly there. So I can just have just around here, possibly increase the contrast in it as well, or decrease it. Something like this might be quite good. And even add more to the grunge as well, and grunge scale, so we can just increase and decrease the scaling of it to however you see fit. Now it is important to note as well that a lot of these generators at the bottom are using these image inputs. So if you remember the mesh maps that we baked out earlier, it's using them. So it's using the world space normal, it's using the position, and it's using the curvature. The curvature in particular, without this mesh map, we wouldn't be able to define the outer areas of the model. So if I just turn this off really quick, you see that it's not there. It needs those maps, and that's why it's important to use mesh maps and bake them out, because without them you couldn't use these particular options. So another option that we can do as well is, let's add another generator. We can also add a mask editor as well. So a mask editor works in sort of a similar way as well. So here we have the curvature. Again, it's using all sort of different options here. So we can increase or decrease the curvature as well. So it's using those edges there as well. So if you go into the options, again, we can say, okay, we don't want to have these sort of large areas here, these big areas. We just want to use the outer areas here. This is quite good if you're using other materials. Obviously the edgeware is best for metal, but you may want to use the mask editor for sort of other materials like say cloth or wood, for instance. And again, I can increase and decrease the contrast in this as well. And you can even invert it as well. So you can see here that some of that sort of dark, those original layers there coming through just on the side there. And it also has different blend options as well. So you can multiply, overlay, screen, etc. And even with the mask editor, You can also add in other textures as well. So I could go into a texture here, and I could go for, say, this aluminum, for instance. This aluminum texture is now added in. Right now you can't see it because the texture opacity is at 0, but I've put it to 1. You'll see that it is coming through there as well. So I'm going to turn this curvature off, and it increases the scaling of it. Actually, we do need the curvature. So if I just put medium back on, large back on, big back on, you can see that the texture is now kind of seeping through a little bit as well. So we can increase or decrease the scaling of that particular texture, increase or decrease the contrast and brightness, or just downright get rid of it as well. And turn this back on. Might add another generator just to showcase is the dirt one. Again, this is really good just to kind of like get a general overview of the dirt, and again, as you can see, it is using different texture maps as well, and we can increase and decrease the dirt levels as we see fit, and even the contrast as well. And again, with these effects, they do have their own opacity and also their own blend options as well. So with this dirt one, I may want to multiply so that way it works with the edges as well, or even like an overlay. Use the effect known as paint as well, and the paint effect uses the brush, but it only paints in grayscale. So essentially we're just saying, okay, using this particular texture, we're going to just bring out some of these areas here using white, or I can just take some away like that. So I could, for instance, go into this edging here, say, okay, it's a bit too uniform, use a brush and just kind of chip at it a little bit just to make it look just a little bit better. So I just want to just play around with it like so. So you can just kind of add or take away areas that you think don't really work that well. Another effect that you might want to add is the color selection. So maybe there's a certain element of your model that shouldn't have certain effects. So with the color selection on, it uses the ID map, so I can pick a color and say, okay, maybe I don't want the screws using this metal edgeware or using particular elements of this layer here. So I can select that and essentially remove those effects, so I can make it visible or invisible. So again, that's a good reason as to why you want to have an ID map as well, because you may want to add or remove certain elements from certain parts of the model as well. If you want like certain effects, I can just turn that down and say, okay, I want these screws to be a little bit lighter than the rest of the model, just to kind of make those stand out and be a bit more pronounced. So that's just a quick overview of masks and some of the different options that you have here as well, and the different filters. So do play around and experiment with these. Masking is a huge part of Substance Painter. Using it really can emphasize and bring out some fantastic amount of detail onto your texture maps and onto your models as well. So play around and experiment with them to see what works and what doesn't work.